Long before Andrew Luck became one of the most hyped quarterbacks in NFL history, he was a young boy immersed in the world of football. His father, Oliver Luck, had played in the NFL, and Andrew's early life was shaped by the world of professional sports. But unlike most sons of former athletes, Andrew wasn't raised in a typical American suburb, growing up playing backyard football with his neighbors. No, his childhood was far more unique, more global, more intense. Andrew's early years were spent overseas, in Europe, where his father held prestigious positions in the sports management. Oliver Luck was first a general manager of the Frankfurt Galaxy and later the Rhein Fire, two teams that competed in NFL Europe. The Luck family wasn't just living in Europe for the experience, they were living and breathing football, even in a country where American football was largely a foreign concept. From the very start, Andrew was surrounded by professional athletes, coaches, and the inner workings of football. It was a world that most kids could only dream of, but for Andrew, it was just everyday life. As a toddler, Andrew often accompanied his father to the field. Even before he could properly speak, he was kicking a football and soaking in the atmosphere of the game. There's a story that's now part of Luck family lore. One day, while his father was working, Jack Elway, father of NFL legend John Elway and head coach of Stanford football at the time, spotted Andrew, just a 3-year-old, playing with a football on the sidelines. With a knowing smile, Jack turned to Oliver and said, half joking, "That kid's going to be a football player." Elway didn't know it then, but his casual remark would prove to be prophetic. While Oliver managed teams and made decisions in boardrooms, Andrew was on the field, interacting with players, watching practices, and absorbing the complexities of the sport. Most kids his age were figuring out the basics of walking and talking, but Andrew was learning how to read defenses. Even at a young age, his natural athleticism stood out. Football wasn't just something he did on weekends, it was part of his DNA. The game had already begun shaping his future. But in 2001, when Andrew was 10 years old, the Luck family made a significant move back to the United States. Oliver had been offered the position of CEO of the Houston Sports Authority, and the family settled in Houston, Texas. While leaving the football-centric world of NFL Europe behind was a big transition, it was in Texas, home to some of the most fiercely competitive football in the country, where Andrew's real journey would begin. In Texas, football was more than just a game, it was a way of life. High school football wasn't just something that kids did for fun, it was the pinnacle of athletic competition, where Friday night games were played in front of thousands of screaming fans. The expectations, especially for quarterbacks, were immense. And it wasn't long before Andrew Luck, the new kid from Europe, started turning heads. At Stratford High School, Andrew made an immediate impression. By his sophomore year, he had already earned the starting quarterback job, a position that carried enormous pressure. Stratford was a proud program, and they didn't hand over the reins to just anyone. But Andrew wasn't like most kids. At 16, he was already 6 feet 4 inches, with a rocket arm, impressive athleticism, and, perhaps most importantly, an unshakable calmness that belied his age. Coaches, teammates, and even opposing players recognized that this kid was different. That sophomore year was just the beginning. Andrew's combination of size, speed, and football IQ allowed him to stand out not only as a passer but as a dual-threat quarterback. He threw for over 1,500 yards and rushed for more than 700 yards, making him a nightmare for opposing defenses. Defensive coordinators across the league struggled to find ways to stop him. Stack the box to stop the run, and he'd pick you apart with precision passes. Drop back into coverage, and he'd make you pay with his legs. It wasn't just his physical gifts that set him apart. Andrew was already showcasing the intangible qualities that would come to define his career: his leadership, maturity, and humility. Despite his success, he never took credit for his accomplishments. He was the type of quarterback who praised his offensive line, thanked his coaches, and always put the team first. Even at 16, he was being called the ultimate team player. That humility, combined with his elite talent, made him not just respected but beloved by his teammates. Heading into his junior year, the expectations were sky high. Stratford's coaching staff recognized they had something special in Andrew, and they weren't the only ones. Opposing teams now entered games with one goal: stop Andrew Luck. It wasn't easy. In his junior season, Andrew threw for nearly 3,000 yards and 27 touchdowns, all while adding another 714 yards on the ground. He was unstoppable, and word about the talented quarterback from Stratford was spreading fast. His performances that season earned him a spot on Rivals.com's All-American team for juniors, and recruiting services began to rank him as one of the top 7 quarterbacks in the entire country. ESPN, Scout.com, and Rivals all agreed Andrew Luck wasn't just good. He was one of the best prospects in the nation. But what truly made him stand out wasn't just his ability to make plays on the field. It was what he did off the field that separated him from the pack. Andrew Luck wasn't just a football player, he was a scholar. While other high school athletes coasted through their classes, satisfied with just getting by, Andrew excelled. He maintained a perfect GPA, earning co-valedictorian honors for his graduating class. To his coaches, this came as no surprise. Andrew had always been as committed to his academics as he was to football. He studied film the same way he studied calculus, meticulously, passionately, and with an insatiable drive to be the best. Colleges across the country were desperate to land him, but Andrew had his sights set on something more than just football. Unlike most top recruits, who gravitated toward schools with powerhouse football programs, Andrew's focus was on academics. He wanted a school that would challenge him intellectually, a place where he could continue to grow both as a football player and as a student. His decision wasn't based on who had the best chance to win a national championship or who could send him to the NFL the quickest. Instead, it was about finding the right balance. And so, Andrew narrowed his list to some of the most prestigious academic institutions in the country. Schools like Stanford, Northwestern, Purdue, Rice, and Virginia were at the top of his list. In the summer before his senior year, Andrew made a decision that shocked many in the recruiting world. He committed to Stanford University. While Stanford had a rich football history, it wasn't exactly the powerhouse that programs like Alabama, USC, or Florida were. But for Andrew, it wasn't just about football. Stanford head coach Jim Harbaugh, a former NFL quarterback himself, knew he had landed a special player. Andrew embodies the balance and excellence of the Stanford scholar athlete, Harbaugh said. To many, it seemed like the perfect match. Stanford was an elite academic institution, and Andrew was the ultimate student athlete. But there was still one more year of high school football to play, and now, with his college future set, all eyes were on him. Opposing defenses knew they were facing one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and they came after him with everything they had. But nothing could stop Andrew. He capped off his high school career by throwing for over 2,500 yards and rushing for another 671 yards, finishing his time at Stratford with an incredible 7,139 passing yards, 53 passing touchdowns, and 2,085 rushing yards. He had become a national sensation, but he remained grounded, humble, and focused on the future. Cliffhanger: as Andrew Luck prepared to leave Texas for the bright lights of Stanford, the question lingered: would this high school phenom be able to turn around a struggling college program, or would the pressure of living up to the hype finally catch up to him? One thing was certain: his journey was just beginning. When Andrew Luck arrived on the Stanford University campus in the summer of 2008, he was filled with excitement, ambition, and confidence. He had chosen Stanford not just for its football program, but for its academics, and he was ready to embrace the challenge of balancing both. But while Andrew was eager to hit the field and prove himself, his introduction to college football didn't go exactly as planned. In fact, it would take him longer than he expected to get his chance. At the time, Stanford was far from being a football powerhouse. The program had been struggling for years, coming off a series of losing seasons. The once proud team that had produced NFL legends like John Elway was now a shadow of its former self, and the pressure was mounting on head coach Jim Harbaugh to turn things around. Harbaugh, who had taken over the team just 2 years prior, knew he had a rebuilding project on his hands, and he also knew that the key to that rebuild was Andrew Luck. But before Luck could take over as the face of the program, he had to wait. Harbaugh, despite his excitement about Andrew's potential, made the decision to redshirt him in his freshman year. That meant Andrew would spend the entire 2008 season on the sidelines, watching as the team fought its way through another difficult year. For the first time in his career, Andrew wasn't on the field making plays. He wasn't leading the huddle, throwing touchdown passes, or running the ball into the end zone. He was just watching. It was a humbling experience for someone who had always been the star. In high school, Andrew had been the heart and soul of his team. At Stratford High, everything had revolved around him. But at Stanford, he was just another talented player waiting for his turn. The 2008 season was tough for Andrew, not because he wasn't good enough, but because he had to be patient. And patience had never been his strong suit. Every day in practice, he threw himself into drills, working on his mechanics, studying the playbook, and learning from the upperclassmen. He knew his time would come, but it didn't make the waiting any easier. Stanford finished the season with a 5-7 record, missing out on a bowl game once again. The team's offense struggled to find consistency, and the starting quarterback, Tavita Pritchard, had his fair share of ups and downs. Harbaugh and his coaching staff knew that changes were needed, and behind the scenes, Andrew Luck was preparing to be that change. As the team's struggles continued, the coaching staff couldn't ignore what they were seeing in practice. Luck wasn't just talented, he was special. By the time the 2009 season rolled around, Andrew was ready to take the reins. Harbaugh made the bold decision to name him the starting quarterback, something Stanford hadn't done with a freshman in nearly 15 years. It was a risky move, but Harbaugh had faith. He had watched Andrew grow over the past year both physically and mentally, and he knew that the young quarterback was prepared for the challenge. It was a lot of responsibility to place on a redshirt freshman, but Andrew wasn't just any freshman. The expectations were high, and the pressure was intense. Stanford had been stuck in a rut for years, suffering through 7 consecutive losing seasons with a combined 25-55 record. The team was hungry for change, desperate for a leader who could turn things around. Andrew understood this better than anyone. He wasn't just stepping into the starting role, he was stepping into the role of the savior of Stanford football. From the moment Andrew took the field as the starting quarterback, there was something different about him. He played with a poise and confidence that was rare for someone his age. He wasn't rattled by the pressure. In fact, it seemed like he thrived on it. His first season as a starter was nothing short of remarkable. Andrew threw for over 2,575 yards and 13 touchdowns while also rushing for 354 yards and 2 more scores. Stanford finished the season with an 8-5 record, a massive improvement over the previous year and the program's best record in years. But more than the stats, it was the way Andrew played that caught everyone's attention. He was a dual-threat quarterback who could beat defenses with both his arm and his legs. He had the intelligence to read defenses and make quick decisions, and the athleticism to extend plays when things broke down. His ability to improvise when the pocket collapsed or when his receivers were covered set him apart from other quarterbacks in college football. His instincts were sharp, and his football IQ was off the charts. Andrew also developed a deep connection with his teammates, particularly running back Toby Gerhart, who would go on to have a Heisman-worthy season. Together, Luck and Gerhart formed a dynamic duo that wreaked havoc on opposing defenses. Gerhart, with his bruising running style, complemented Luck's precision passing, making Stanford's offense one of the most dangerous in the Pac-10. As the season progressed, Andrew's confidence continued to grow. He wasn't just a freshman quarterback learning the ropes, he was a leader. He commanded the huddle with authority, earning the respect of both his teammates and his coaches. Harbaugh, who had placed so much faith in Luck, couldn't help but be impressed by the way the young quarterback had stepped up. The more Luck played, the more it became clear that Stanford had found their future star. The season's highlight came in a thrilling victory over the USC Trojans, a team that had long dominated the Pac-10. Stanford entered the game as heavy underdogs, but Luck didn't care. He had spent the entire season proving that the old Stanford was gone and that the new Stanford was here to stay. With Luck under center, the Cardinal demolished USC by a shocking 55-21 margin. It was a statement win for the program, and for Luck, it was the game that officially put him on the map. He threw for 144 yards and 2 touchdowns, while Gerhart rumbled for 178 yards and 3 scores. But the real story was how Luck had guided the team with the poise of a seasoned veteran, outplaying USC's much-hyped defense. Suddenly, Andrew Luck wasn't just a promising young quarterback, he was becoming a national star. The win over USC marked the moment when the college football world took notice. This wasn't the same Stanford team that had been a bottom feeder for years. With Andrew at the helm, the Cardinal were now a legitimate force in the Pac-10, and people were starting to whisper about a potential Heisman campaign for the young quarterback. Although Stanford lost their final 2 regular season games to Cal and Notre Dame, the progress was undeniable. The team had not only earned its first winning record in years, but it had also secured a bowl game appearance, a feat that hadn't seemed possible just a season earlier. Luck had helped engineer the program's turnaround, but for him, this was just the beginning. Heading into his sophomore season, the expectations were even higher. Now, Andrew wasn't just the starting quarterback, he was the face of the program. He had established himself as a leader, but with that came even more pressure. Every team in the Pac-10 was gunning for Stanford, and every defensive coordinator was spending extra hours studying film, trying to find a way to stop Andrew Luck. But the more pressure that mounted, the better Luck seemed to perform. In his sophomore year, Andrew Luck took his game to a new level. Stanford finished the season with a 12-1 record, including a dominant win over Virginia Tech in the Orange Bowl. Luck threw for 3,338 yards and 32 touchdowns, breaking John Elway's school record for the most touchdown passes in a single season. His total of 3,791 yards of offense was also a Stanford record, and his 170.2 passer rating ranked among the best in the country. He wasn't just winning games, he was dominating them. For his efforts, Luck was named Pac-10 Offensive Player of the Year, and he finished as the runner-up for the Heisman Trophy, coming in second only to Cam Newton. It was an incredible season, and it cemented Luck as one of the best quarterbacks in the country. But even though he could have declared for the 2011 NFL Draft, where he was projected to be the number 1 overall pick, Andrew shocked the world once again by deciding to return to Stanford. He wasn't done yet. There was more to prove, and there was still one thing missing: a national championship. Cliffhanger, with the NFL waiting and millions of dollars on the line, Andrew Luck made the surprising decision to stay at Stanford. As he prepared for his junior season, the pressure was at an all-time high. Would he be able to live up to the hype and deliver a championship for Stanford? Or would the weight of expectations finally catch up to him? When Andrew Luck announced his decision to return to Stanford University for his junior season, the college football world was stunned. This was a player who had already achieved so much. He had led Stanford to a 12-1 record, broken John Elway's school records, and finished as the runner-up for the Heisman Trophy. Scouts, coaches, and analysts all agreed, if Luck declared for the 2011 NFL Draft, he would almost certainly be the number 1 overall pick. The Carolina Panthers held the top spot and were desperate for a franchise quarterback. Luck, with his elite physical traits, football IQ, and leadership abilities, was viewed as a once-in-a-generation talent, someone who could transform an entire organization. But Andrew wasn't swayed by the allure of the NFL or the millions of dollars waiting for him. For him, football wasn't just about fame or money. It was about the love of the game, the commitment to his teammates, and the unfinished business he still had at Stanford. He wanted to complete his degree in architectural design, a promise he had made to himself and his family. He valued education as much as football, and the chance to graduate from Stanford, one of the most prestigious universities in the world, was an opportunity he wasn't ready to give up. There was also something else driving Andrew. He wasn't satisfied with what he had already accomplished. Yes, he had broken records and won major games, but there was one thing still missing: a national championship. Stanford had come close in 2010, finishing the season ranked number 4 in the country after a dominant Orange Bowl victory. But close wasn't good enough for Luck. He wanted to bring a championship to Palo Alto, and he believed the 2011 season was his best chance to do it. But with that decision came immense pressure. By returning to college, Andrew had painted a target on his back. Now, every team in the Pac-12 had him circled on their calendars. Defensive coordinators were spending sleepless nights figuring out how to stop him, and every player who lined up against Stanford knew they were facing the best quarterback in the country. On top of that, the national media was watching his every move. The spotlight was brighter than ever, and for the first time in his life, Andrew was under constant scrutiny. From the moment he announced he was staying, the pressure on Luck was relentless. Fans, analysts, and scouts all expected perfection. Anything less than a national title would be seen as a disappointment, and every game he played was viewed through the lens of his NFL potential. Every throw, every decision, every mistake, it was all being dissected by the football world. In the eyes of many, Andrew had nothing to gain by staying in school. If he played poorly or got injured, his draft stock could plummet. It was a massive gamble, one that few players would have taken. But for Andrew, it wasn't about what the world expected of him, it was about what he expected of himself. As the 2011 season kicked off, Andrew Luck was in complete control of his game. He had spent the offseason working on every aspect of his craft. His footwork, his mechanics, his understanding of defensive schemes, it had all been sharpened to perfection. He returned to Stanford with a greater command of the offense, more experience under his belt, and an unshakable confidence that this could be the year the Cardinal finally broke through. Stanford came into the season ranked in the top 10, and for good reason. The team had talent across the board. The offensive line, led by future NFL stars David DeCastro and Jonathan Martin, was one of the best in the country. Luck had weapons at his disposal, including tight ends Coby Fleener and Zach Ertz, both of whom would go on to have successful NFL careers. The running game, powered by the bruising style of Stepfan Taylor, provided balance and kept defenses honest. But Stanford's success still rested on Luck's shoulders. The team would go as far as he could take them. The season began with high expectations, and Andrew wasted no time in showing the world why he was regarded as the best player in college football. In the opening weeks, Stanford blew through their competition, with Luck orchestrating the offense like a maestro. He was unstoppable, throwing precise passes that threaded the needle between defenders and making plays with his legs when things broke down. His poise in the pocket, his ability to make split-second decisions, and his sheer physicality made him a nightmare for opposing defenses. But as the season wore on, the pressure mounted. Stanford wasn't just aiming for a conference title, they had their sights set on the national championship, and with each passing week, the games grew more intense. Every opponent they faced came prepared with their best shot, determined to bring down the mighty Cardinal. And every week, Andrew answered the call. There were several standout moments that defined Luck's junior season, but one game in particular stands out: the showdown against USC in late October. It was a game that would test Andrew's will, his leadership, and his ability to handle the most intense pressure imaginable. The 2011 game between Stanford and USC was a clash of two titans. USC, under head coach Lane Kiffin, had long been one of the premier programs in college football. Though the Trojans were in the midst of NCAA sanctions and weren't eligible for postseason play, they still had immense talent on their roster, including future NFL quarterback Matt Barkley. Stanford entered the game undefeated, ranked number 4 in the nation, and with their national championship hopes on the line. USC, despite not being able to compete for a title, wanted nothing more than to spoil Stanford's dream season. The atmosphere at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum was electric. Over 90,000 fans packed the stadium, most of them rooting for the Trojans, but a sizable contingent of Stanford fans had made the trip to see their quarterback. The pressure on Andrew was palpable. This was the biggest game of the season so far, and it was going to be a battle from start to finish. From the opening snap, it was clear that USC wasn't going to back down. They pressured Luck relentlessly, sending blitzes from every angle, trying to force him into mistakes. It worked at first. Early in the game, Luck threw a rare interception, which USC capitalized on to take the lead. The Coliseum erupted in cheers, sensing that an upset was brewing. But Andrew didn't flinch. He didn't panic. Instead, he did what he always did. He stayed calm and methodically worked his way back into the game. He led Stanford on multiple scoring drives, picking apart the USC defense with surgical precision. He connected with his tight ends and receivers on key third downs, keeping the chains moving and keeping his team in the game. As the game progressed, it became clear that this was going to be a classic. It was back and forth, with both teams trading blows, neither willing to give an inch. By the time the fourth quarter rolled around, the game was tied, and every play was magnified. With just over 3 minutes left, USC took the lead, and it looked like Stanford's national title hopes might be slipping away. But with the game on the line, Andrew Luck showed why he was the best player in college football. On Stanford's final drive, he made clutch throw after clutch throw, marching the team down the field with the poise of a seasoned NFL quarterback. He converted on third down, then again on fourth down, finding his receivers in tight windows, even as the USC defense closed in around him. With the clock winding down, Andrew led Stanford into field goal range, and the game was sent into overtime. But it wasn't over yet. In the third overtime, with both teams running on fumes, Andrew did what he had done all season. He found a way to win. He orchestrated one final drive, capping it off with a touchdown pass to Coby Fleener that sealed the victory for Stanford. The game ended 56-48, and Luck had delivered one of the greatest performances of his career. In the aftermath of the game, the national media couldn't stop talking about Andrew Luck. His leadership, his resilience, and his ability to perform under pressure were on full display. The win over USC solidified his status as the best quarterback in the country, and Stanford's march toward the national championship continued. Despite his incredible performances throughout the season, Andrew Luck once again found himself finishing as the runner-up for the Heisman Trophy. For the second year in a row, he came in second, this time losing out to Robert Griffin III, the dynamic quarterback from Baylor. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Luck had done everything in his power to lead Stanford to victory week after week, and yet the Heisman still eluded him. But Andrew wasn't one to dwell on individual accolades. He had his eyes on a bigger prize, the national championship. Unfortunately, that dream would also fall short. Stanford's season came to a heartbreaking end in the Fiesta Bowl. Unfortunately, Andrew Luck's dream of a national championship would come to a heartbreaking end in the 2012 Fiesta Bowl. Stanford faced off against a high-powered offense of Oklahoma State, led by their own star quarterback, Brandon Weeden, and electric wide receiver Justin Blackmon. The stakes couldn't have been higher for Luck and his teammates. For Andrew, it wasn't just about winning the game, it was about capping off his storied career at Stanford with a victory that would solidify his legacy. From the very start, the game lived up to its billing. Both teams traded blows, with Luck playing like the generational talent everyone had expected him to be. He carved up the Oklahoma State defense, throwing pinpoint passes and keeping Stanford's offense moving at a relentless pace. Every drive felt like it could be a defining moment, every completion a small step toward achieving the ultimate goal. With every snap, Luck demonstrated his mastery of the game. His footwork was flawless, his decision-making lightning quick, and his ability to make big plays under pressure was unparalleled. But as much as Luck shined, Oklahoma State wasn't backing down. Justin Blackmon, in particular, was giving Stanford's defense fits. He torched the secondary for big plays, keeping Oklahoma State in the game. Weeden, too, was putting on a show, matching Luck throw for throw. It was a game that had fans on the edge of their seats, and by the fourth quarter, it was clear that this would come down to who could make the final big play. With the game tied late in the fourth quarter, Stanford had a chance to win it. Luck led his team on a brilliant drive, moving them deep into field goal range. All they needed was a simple chip shot to seal the victory. The stadium held its breath as Stanford's kicker lined up the potential game winner. But in a cruel twist of fate, the kick sailed wide, sending the game into overtime. It was a devastating moment for Andrew and the team. They had come so close, only for victory to slip away in the final seconds. But as always, Andrew remained composed. He gathered his teammates on the sideline, encouraging them, reminding them that the game wasn't over. They had been here before, in tight games, and they had always found a way to win. In overtime, Stanford once again had a chance to take the lead, but the offense stalled, and they were forced to settle for another field goal attempt. This time, the kick was blocked, and the momentum swung firmly in favor of Oklahoma State. It was like watching the game slip away in slow motion. The Cowboys took full advantage, marching down the field and kicking the game-winning field goal. Just like that, Stanford's season was over. For Andrew, the loss was heartbreaking. He had poured everything into that game, into the entire season, and to come so close only to fall short was a tough pill to swallow. As he walked off the field, surrounded by his teammates, the realization began to sink in: this was his final game as a Stanford Cardinal. There would be no national championship, no fairy tale ending. Despite the painful ending to his college career, Andrew Luck's legacy at Stanford was unshakable. He had completely transformed the program, taking it from a perennial loser to a national powerhouse. When Luck arrived on campus, Stanford was coming off 7 straight losing seasons. By the time he left, they had strung together 3 consecutive winning seasons, including a 12-1 record and a BCS Bowl victory. Luck had also rewritten the record books at Stanford. He finished his career as the school's all-time leader in total offense, with 10,387 yards, and career touchdown passes, 82, breaking records once held by his idol, John Elway. His final stats were staggering: 9,430 passing yards, 82 touchdowns, and just 22 interceptions over the course of 3 seasons. But the numbers only told part of the story. Luck's impact on the program went far beyond statistics. He had turned Stanford into a legitimate contender, a team that could stand toe-to-toe with the best in the country. More than that, Andrew had proven himself to be a rare breed of quarterback, one who could dominate on the field but also lead with humility and grace. His coaches, teammates, and opponents all spoke highly of his character. He was the type of player who made everyone around him better, not just because of his talent, but because of his leadership and work ethic. He wasn't loud or brash. He didn't seek attention or accolades. Instead, he led by example, showing up every day and giving everything he had. As the 2012 NFL Draft approached, it was clear that Andrew Luck was the undisputed #1 pick. Scouts raved about his mechanics, his ability to read defenses, and his athleticism. At 6 feet 4 inches and 234 pounds, he had the prototypical size for an NFL quarterback. He could make every throw, whether it was a deep bomb down the sideline or a quick slant over the middle. But what truly set him apart was his football IQ. Luck was a student of the game, capable of diagnosing defenses and making adjustments on the fly. He was as close to a perfect quarterback prospect as anyone had ever seen. Some analysts even went so far as to compare him to Peyton Manning and John Elway, 2 of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. In fact, many believed Luck was the best quarterback prospect since Elway in 1983. NFL teams were desperate for a franchise quarterback, and Andrew Luck fit the bill perfectly. In the months leading up to the draft, the NFL world was buzzing about Andrew Luck. He was viewed as a can't-miss prospect, someone who could step in and immediately change the fortunes of a franchise. The question wasn't whether Luck would be the first overall pick, it was which team would have the privilege of drafting him. As it turned out, the team at the top of the draft order was the Indianapolis Colts, the very team that had been built around Peyton Manning for over a decade. Manning, who had missed the entire 2011 season due to a neck injury, had been the face of the franchise, leading the Colts to 2 Super Bowl appearances and 1 championship. But with Manning's future in doubt and the Colts coming off a disastrous 2014 season, the team made the difficult decision to part ways with their legendary quarterback. It was the end of an era in Indianapolis, but it also marked the beginning of a new one. On April 26, 2012, the Indianapolis Colts made it official. With the first overall pick in the NFL Draft, they selected Andrew Luck, officially ushering in a new chapter for the franchise. Colts fans, who had grown accustomed to success under Peyton Manning, were excited but also anxious. Could Luck live up to the immense expectations? Could he fill the shoes of one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time? For Andrew, the challenge was daunting, but he approached it with the same humility and determination that had defined his entire career. In interviews, he repeatedly downplayed comparisons to Manning, insisting that he was focused on being the best version of himself. He wasn't there to replace a legend, he was there to write his own story. For many NFL fans, especially in Indianapolis, April 26, 2012, was a bittersweet day. The Colts were officially turning the page on the Peyton Manning era, and the city was saying goodbye to the quarterback who had delivered them their first and only Super Bowl championship. Manning had been more than just the face of the franchise. He had transformed the Colts, turning them from a struggling team into perennial contenders. He was a legend in every sense of the word. So when the Colts decided to part ways with him due to the uncertainty surrounding his neck injury, it felt like the end of an era. But as one chapter closed, another one opened. On that fateful April night, the Colts made a choice that they hoped would secure the future of the franchise for the next decade or more. They selected Andrew Luck with the first overall pick in the 2012 NFL Draft. From the moment Luck's name was announced, the weight of an entire franchise and city fell on his shoulders. The comparisons to Manning were immediate and relentless. While Andrew had done his best to downplay the comparisons, everyone knew that he was stepping into an impossible situation. He wasn't just being asked to be a great quarterback, he was being asked to replace one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. The Colts organization, from the front office to the fans, placed their full faith in Andrew. They believed he was the man who could lead them back to glory. But the expectations were enormous. Unlike most rookies, who were given time to develop and adjust to the speed of the NFL, Luck would be asked to deliver right away. The Colts weren't planning for a slow rebuild, they expected to compete, and they expected Luck to be the reason why. As Andrew settled into Indianapolis and began preparing for his rookie season, he maintained his signature humility and focus. He knew the challenges that lay ahead, but instead of being overwhelmed by them, he embraced them. His approach was methodical, just as it had been at Stanford. He immersed himself in the Colts playbook, spending countless hours with head coach Chuck Pagano and offensive coordinator Bruce Arians, learning the nuances of the offense. He studied film relentlessly, trying to anticipate the kinds of defenses he would face in the NFL. He knew that the transition from college to the pros would be steep, but Andrew was always a student of the game, and he was determined to succeed. The 2012 NFL season kicked off with anticipation swirling around Indianapolis. The Colts were coming off a dismal 2-14 season, their worst in years, and the once proud franchise had hit rock bottom. The pressure on Luck to turn things around was immense. Colts fans, who had grown accustomed to winning with Peyton Manning, were eager to see if their new quarterback could deliver. The media had already labeled Luck as the most NFL-ready quarterback since John Elway, but now, it was time to see if he could live up to the hype. Andrew's NFL debut came in Week 1 against the Chicago Bears, and all eyes were on him. The Bears had a formidable defense, and many expected the rookie quarterback to struggle in his first real NFL action. And struggle he did. The Colts were outmatched, and Luck had a tough day, throwing 3 interceptions in a 41-21 loss. The media was quick to jump on the narrative. Was this rookie really ready for the NFL? Could he handle the pressure of replacing Manning? But Andrew, true to his nature, didn't let the noise affect him. He had been through rough games before, and he knew that one bad game didn't define a career. He returned to practice the following week more determined than ever, focusing on what he could control, improving his game, learning from his mistakes, and continuing to lead the team. The very next week, Luck earned his first NFL victory, a hard-fought win over the Minnesota Vikings. He completed 20 of 31 passes for 224 yards and 2 touchdowns, giving Colts fans the glimpse of what was to come. But it wasn't just his stat line that impressed, it was his poise under pressure. He looked comfortable in the pocket, unafraid to take hits, and when the game was on the line, he delivered. As the season wore on, Andrew Luck began to show why he had been the consensus #1 pick. Game after game, He demonstrated his ability to read defenses, make quick decisions, and lead his team in critical moments. What stood out most, though, was his resilience. No matter how many times he was hit, no matter how many turnovers he made, Luck kept coming back, unfazed. His mental toughness was extraordinary for a rookie. Perhaps the defining moment of Luck's rookie season came in Week 13 against the Detroit Lions. The Colts entered the game with a 7-4 record, and while they had shown flashes of brilliance, the season was still hanging in the balance. The Lions, led by quarterback Matthew Stafford, built a 12-point lead with just over 2 minutes remaining in the game. Colts fans were bracing for a loss, but Luck had other plans. What followed was one of the most incredible comebacks in NFL history. With less than 2 minutes on the clock, Luck led the Colts down the field, throwing a touchdown pass to cut the lead to 5. Then, after the defense forced a 3-and-out, Luck got the ball back with less than a minute to play. Starting from his own 25-yard line, he calmly moved the team into scoring position, making clutch throw after clutch throw. With just 4 seconds left on the clock, the Colts faced a 4th and 10 from the Lions' 14-yard line. It was do or die. Luck took the snap, scanned the field, and found wide receiver Donnie Avery streaking across the middle. He fired a perfect pass, hitting Avery in stride as the receiver raced into the end zone for the game-winning touchdown. The Colts won the game 35-33, and Luck had delivered his 5th game-winning drive of the season, a rookie record. Colts fans, and the entire NFL, were witnessing something special. By the end of his rookie year, Andrew Luck had completely changed the narrative. The Colts, a team that had won just 2 games the year before, finished with an 11-5 record and a spot in the playoffs. Luck had thrown for 4,374 yards, breaking the NFL rookie record for passing yards. He had also accounted for 28 total touchdowns and had engineered an astonishing 7 game-winning drives, proving that he could perform in the clutch. He was named to the Pro Bowl, and the buzz around him only grew. Analysts began to wonder, was Andrew Luck the next great quarterback? Could he be even better than Peyton Manning? The pressure on him was only growing, but Andrew, as always, kept his head down and focused on the task at hand. For him, it wasn't about the individual accolades, it was about winning. But as much as Luck impressed during his rookie season, there was one aspect of his game that was cause for concern: the hits. Behind a shaky offensive line, Andrew was sacked 41 times during the season, one of the highest totals in the league. And those were just the official sacks. The number of times he was hit or pressured was far higher. The hits came hard and fast, and while Luck had proven he could take the punishment, the toll was starting to add up. Andrew Luck's style of play, his willingness to stand tall in the pocket, take hits, and extend plays was both a blessing and a curse. While it allowed him to make spectacular plays, it also left him vulnerable to the relentless physicality of the NFL. Luck's toughness became legendary in his rookie year. He would take brutal hits, bounce back up, and never complain. His offensive linemen, coaches, and even opponents were often left in awe of his ability to absorb punishment and keep going. But the truth was that those hits were starting to wear him down, even if he didn't show it. Throughout his rookie season, Luck had played through bumps and bruises, but he never used it as an excuse. Behind his calm demeanor, the pain was growing. The Colts, however, were focused on the positives. They had found their new franchise quarterback, and he had delivered immediate results. The future looked bright in Indianapolis. But for all of Luck's success, there was a growing sense that the team wasn't doing enough to protect their most valuable asset. The offensive line was inconsistent, and Luck's tendency to hold onto the ball to make plays left him exposed to dangerous hits. The front office didn't seem to fully grasp the long-term risks of letting Luck absorb that kind of punishment. But Andrew kept pushing forward. He was determined to win, and for him, the physical pain was just part of the game. Heading into his second season, the expectations were even higher. Luck was no longer the new kid on the block, he was an established starter, and the Colts were now seen as legitimate contenders. With the division rival Houston Texans on the decline and the Tennessee Titans and Jacksonville Jaguars still rebuilding, the AFC South was the Colts to lose. Anything short of a deep playoff run would be seen as a disappointment. Luck didn't flinch. In the opening weeks of the 2013 season, he continued to show the poise and leadership that had defined his rookie year. His growth as a quarterback was evident. He had become more efficient, cutting down on the turnovers that had plagued him in his first year. After throwing 18 interceptions as a rookie, Luck was determined to be more careful with the football, and it showed in his early performances. But perhaps the most notable change was how much more comfortable Luck seemed in the Colts system. Bruce Arians had departed to take the head coaching job with the Arizona Cardinals, and the Colts had brought in Pep Hamilton, Luck's former offensive coordinator from Stanford, to take over the offense. The reunion between Hamilton and Luck paid immediate dividends. The two had a strong rapport, and Luck thrived under Hamilton's balanced offense, which relied on a strong running game to take pressure off the quarterback. The Colts got off to a fast start, winning 3 of their first 4 games, and Luck was playing the best football of his young career. His completion percentage had risen by 6 points, and his interception rate had dropped dramatically. He was making smarter decisions, spreading the ball around, and showing a level of maturity beyond his years. His performance during the early weeks of the season led some analysts to proclaim that Luck wasn't just the future of the NFL, he was already one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But while Luck's individual play was stellar, the real test of his leadership came in Week 7 against the Denver Broncos. The game wasn't just another matchup, it was being billed as the return Peyton Manning's first game back in Indianapolis since being released by the Colts in 2012. It was an emotional night for Colts fans, many of whom still held Manning in the highest regard. The man who had brought them a Super Bowl was returning, but he was wearing a different jersey. The pressure on Andrew was immense. Manning had been the heart and soul of the Colts for over a decade, and now Luck was being asked to outplay the legend who had set the standard in Indianapolis. It was a classic passing of the torch moment, but it was also a game where Andrew knew he had to prove himself to the Colts fanbase. Could he really fill Manning's shoes? Could he be the quarterback that would bring another championship to Indianapolis? The game lived up to its billing. Manning and Luck traded blows throughout the night, with both quarterbacks delivering vintage performances. But it was Luck who came out on top. He threw for 3 touchdowns, while Manning threw an uncharacteristic interception that swung the momentum in the Colts' favor. In the end, Indianapolis defeated Denver 39-33, and Luck had officially emerged from Manning's shadow. The Colts fans who had once looked back longingly at the Manning era now fully embraced Luck as their new franchise quarterback. Luck's leadership and resilience were on full display in that game. He had taken on one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history, on one of the best teams in the league, and won. It was a defining moment, not just for the 2013 season, but for Luck's career. It solidified his place as the future of the Colts, and the comparisons to Manning, while still present, began to fade. But even as Luck thrived on the field, the physical toll was beginning to add up. Despite the improvements to the offense, the Colts' offensive line remained inconsistent, and Luck continued to take too many hits. He had developed a reputation for being tough as nails, standing tall in the pocket and making throws under pressure. But there were games where he was sacked multiple times, and the bruises were starting to pile up. Still, Andrew never complained. He had been raised to believe that football was a physical game, and he accepted the hits as part of the job. The Colts finished the regular season with another 11-5 record, earning a playoff berth and positioning themselves as legitimate contenders in the AFC. But if the regular season had shown what Luck was capable of, the playoffs would reveal his true greatness. The Colts' wild card matchup was against the Kansas City Chiefs, a team with a powerful defense and an offense led by the savvy veteran Alex Smith. The Colts were at home, and expectations were high. But what unfolded in that game would become one of the most iconic moments of Andrew Luck's career and one of the greatest comebacks in NFL history. The game started disastrously for Indianapolis. The Chiefs dominated the first half, building a 38-10 lead early in the third quarter. The Colts' defense was reeling, unable to stop Smith and the Chiefs' offense, and Luck had thrown 3 interceptions. It seemed like Indianapolis was finished, and many fans in the stadium began to lose hope. But Andrew Luck had other ideas. With the Colts season on the line, Luck led one of the most unbelievable comebacks the NFL had ever seen. Over the next 2 quarters, Luck willed his team back into the game, throwing for touchdown after touchdown. He made pinpoint passes, scrambled for first downs, and never once seemed rattled by the deficit. Every drive was a masterpiece, as Luck dissected the Chiefs' defense with precision. The defining moment of the game came late in the 4th quarter. With the Colts trailing by 6 points, running back Donald Brown fumbled the ball near the goal line. The ball bounced around before landing in Luck's hands, and without hesitation, Andrew scooped it up and dove into the end zone for the touchdown, cutting the Chiefs' lead to 1 point. On the Colts' final drive, with the game on the line, Luck threw a perfect 64-yard bomb to wide receiver T.Y. Hilton, giving the Colts the lead for the first time in the game. It was a play that capped off one of the greatest individual performances in NFL playoff history. The Colts had come back from a 28-point deficit, the second largest comeback in postseason history, to win the game 45-44. Luck finished the game with 443 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and a legacy-defining victory. The media hailed the performance as one of the greatest comebacks of all time, and Luck's place among the league's elite quarterbacks was solidified. He had proven that he could carry his team, even in the most impossible situations. Despite the Colts' incredible win over the Chiefs, their playoff run would come to an end the following week in the divisional round against the New England Patriots. Luck threw for over 300 yards, but the Patriots, led by Tom Brady, were too much for Indianapolis to handle. Still, the 2013 season was a massive success for Luck and the Colts. He had proven that he could lead a team in the playoffs, and the future looked bright. But behind the scenes, the hits kept coming. While Luck's performance against the Chiefs was legendary, it had come at a cost. The physical toll of the 2013 season, combined with the hits he had taken during his rookie year, were starting to accumulate. Luck's toughness had become a hallmark of his game, but there were concerns about how long he could continue to absorb the punishment. By the time the 2015 NFL season rolled around, Andrew Luck was at the peak of his powers. He had led the Colts to 3 consecutive 11-5 seasons, established himself as one of the brightest young stars in the NFL, and nearly reached the Super Bowl. His place as the heir to Peyton Manning had been solidified, and the future looked brighter than ever for both Luck and the Colts. But beneath the surface, something wasn't right. Behind the thrilling comebacks, the game-winning drives, and the MVP-caliber performances, Andrew's body was slowly breaking down. The hits had been relentless. Over his first 3 seasons in the league, Luck had been sacked 100 times and had been hit countless more. Each hit took a little more out of him. His ability to absorb punishment had become almost mythic. Fans and analysts marveled at his toughness, but the truth was that no human body, no matter how strong or durable, could withstand that kind of punishment forever. Luck was starting to feel the effects of those hits in ways he never had before. Lingering pain, nagging injuries, and constant soreness became his daily reality. But Andrew, true to form, kept pushing through. He had been raised to embrace the physical nature of the game, to play through pain, to never complain. Football had always been about sacrifice, and for Andrew, that meant enduring the physical toll. He told himself that the pain was temporary, that the hits were part of the job. But as the 2015 season began, that pain became harder to ignore. Luck entered the 2015 season with enormous expectations. After the Colts had come so close to reaching the Super Bowl the previous year, many believed that this was the year Luck would finally lead Indianapolis back to the promised land. The Colts had added key pieces in the offseason, including veteran receiver Andre Johnson and running back Frank Gore, and the team was considered one of the favorites to win the AFC. But from the very start, something was off. In Week 3, during a game against the Tennessee Titans, Luck was hit hard in the pocket and suffered a shoulder injury. He finished the game, leading the Colts to a narrow victory, but the injury lingered. The pain in his throwing shoulder made every pass feel like a struggle. He had difficulty generating the same velocity on his throws, and his accuracy suffered. But Luck, unwilling to let his team down, played through the pain. He missed the next 2 games, his first missed starts in the NFL, but returned in Week 6 to face the New England Patriots in a highly anticipated rematch of the previous year's AFC Championship game. While Luck put up a strong performance, throwing for over 300 yards, the Colts lost, and Andrews' struggles continued. The shoulder injury didn't heal the way he had hoped. The pain persisted, and his play was erratic. Then, in Week 9, disaster struck. The Colts faced the Denver Broncos, one of the league's most ferocious defenses. Throughout the game, Denver's pass rush relentlessly attacked Luck, hitting him over and over again. Despite the pressure, Luck led the Colts to a victory, throwing for 252 yards and 2 touchdowns. But in the fourth quarter, one hit changed everything. As Luck was crushed between 2 Broncos defenders, his body took a beating that would prove to be his most devastating yet. 2 days after the game, the Colts announced that Luck had suffered a lacerated kidney and a partially torn abdominal muscle. The injuries were severe, and Luck's season was over. The news sent shockwaves through the Colts organization and the NFL. The team's franchise quarterback, the man who had been the cornerstone of their success, was now facing months of recovery. Luck's lacerated kidney was no ordinary injury. It was serious, and it forced him to reflect on the toll his body had taken over the years. For the first time, Andrew began to realize that the hits weren't just bruises that would heal, they were injuries that could permanently alter his life. The 2015 season ended without Luck, and the Colts finished a disappointing 8-8, missing the playoffs for the first time in the Luck era. As Andrew began his long road to recovery, questions began to swirl about his future. Would he be able to return to his old form? How would his body hold up after such a serious injury? But for Andrew, there was no doubt. He would return. He would fight his way back. Luck threw himself into the recovery process, undergoing surgery to repair his shoulder and months of grueling rehabilitation. The physical therapy was intense, but it wasn't the physical pain that weighed on him the most, it was the mental exhaustion. The constant cycle of pain, treatment, and rehabilitation was draining. Andrew had always been mentally strong, but now he found himself struggling with the emotional toll of the injuries. By the time the 2016 season rolled around, Luck was back on the field, but he wasn't the same. The shoulder injury lingered, and while Luck was able to play through it, the pain never truly went away. He missed 1 game due to a concussion, but otherwise played the entire season. Luck threw for 4,240 yards and 31 touchdowns, proving once again that he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But behind the scenes, his body was falling apart. The hits kept coming. Luck was sacked 41 times in 2016, and the Colts continued to struggle with protecting him. Despite his impressive numbers, the team finished with another 8-8 record, missing the playoffs once again. It was clear that the constant physical punishment was beginning to take a toll not just on Andrew's body, but on his spirit. After the 2016 season, Andrew Luck's shoulder had deteriorated to the point where surgery was unavoidable. In January of 2017, he underwent a shoulder surgery that was supposed to fix the lingering issues and get him ready for the upcoming season. But as the months passed, it became clear that the recovery wasn't going as planned. Luck missed all of training camp in the preseason, and as the regular season approached, the Colts made the difficult decision to place him on injured reserve. The quarterback who had once seemed invincible was now watching from the sidelines, unable to throw without pain. Speculation about his future began to swirl. Was his career in jeopardy? Would he ever return to his old form? Desperate to find a solution, Luck traveled to Europe to receive treatment on his shoulder. But even after months of rehabilitation, the pain persisted. He had gone from being one of the most promising quarterbacks in the league to a man unsure if he would ever play again. For Andrew, the frustration was overwhelming. He had always been able to rely on his body to bounce back, to recover from the hits. But now, his body had betrayed him. The cycle of injury, pain, and rehab was emotionally exhausting. The game he had once loved, the game that had been his life, was starting to lose its joy. By 2018, Luck's shoulder had finally healed enough for him to make his long-awaited return to the field. But after missing the entire 2017 season, no one knew what to expect. Would he be the same quarterback? Would he be able to take the hits again? Would his shoulder hold up? In the season opener against the Cincinnati Bengals, Andrew answered those questions with a resounding yes. He threw for 319 yards and 2 touchdowns, showing flashes of the player he had once been. Week after week, Luck's confidence grew. He led the Colts to a 10-6 record and a playoff berth, and his remarkable comeback earned him the NFL Comeback Player of the Year award. Luck threw for 4,593 yards and 39 touchdowns, finishing 5th in the league in passing yards and 2nd in touchdowns. He was back, and Colts fans began to believe once again that a Super Bowl was within reach. His leadership on the field, his ability to make the impossible throws, and his determination to win reminded everyone why he had once been hailed as the future of the NFL. The Colts won their wild card playoff game against the Houston Texans, but their season came to an end in the divisional round against the Kansas City Chiefs. Still, the 2018 season was a triumph for Luck. He had proven that he could return from injury, that he could still be one of the best quarterbacks in the league. But behind the scenes, the toll of the game was catching up to him. The physical pain hadn't gone away. The cycle of injury, pain, and recovery continued, and Luck began to question whether it was all worth it. In the summer of 2019, just weeks before the start of the NFL season, news broke that would shock the entire sports world. Andrew Luck was retiring from football at the age of 29. The announcement came during the Colts' 3rd preseason game, and the response was a mixture of shock, disbelief, and heartbreak. Luck, who had become the face of the franchise and one of the brightest stars in the NFL, was walking away from football at the peak of his career. As news of his decision spread through Lucas Oil Stadium, Colts fans, many of whom had worshipped Luck for his toughness and leadership, reacted with boos as he walked off the field. For the fans, it was hard to understand. Here was their star quarterback, seemingly back to his best after an incredible 2018 season, suddenly calling it quits. But for Andrew Luck, the decision had been building for years. The constant cycle of injuries, rehab, and pain had drained him not just physically, but emotionally. Football, the game he had loved since childhood, had become a burden. In his retirement press conference, Luck was open and emotional. With tears in his eyes, he described how he had been stuck in a cycle of injury, pain, and rehab for the last 4 years. It wasn't just the physical toll that had pushed him to this decision, it was the mental exhaustion of constantly fighting to get healthy, only to face more pain. "I've been stuck in this process," Luck said. "I haven't been able to live the life I want to live. It's taken the joy out of this game." The words hit hard for everyone who had watched Luck play. For so long, he had been the ultimate warrior on the field, always bouncing back from the hits, always getting up after the punishment. But behind the scenes, Luck had been battling something much deeper. The hits had caught up to him, and his body, once invincible, had begun to fail him. For Andrew Luck, the decision to retire wasn't about giving up on football, it was about choosing a life that wasn't consumed by pain. He had spent his entire career playing through injury, pushing his body to its limits, and sacrificing his own health for the game he loved. But at just 29 years old, Luck realized that he couldn't continue living in constant pain. There had been moments, he admitted, when he didn't know if he wanted to play football anymore. The injuries had stripped the joy from the game, and the thought of going through another grueling rehab process was unbearable. After suffering a calf strain during the 2019 off-season, Luck realized that he couldn't do it anymore. The calf injury was supposed to be minor, but it lingered, and with it came the realization that his body was sending him a message: it was time to stop. In the weeks leading up to his decision, Luck wrestled with the idea of retirement. He loved football, but he had come to a point where he could no longer enjoy the game. It had become a source of constant stress and anxiety, a never-ending cycle of pain and rehab. For Andrew, who had always been passionate about the sport, the realization was devastating. But he also knew that he had to take control of his life. The booing from the fans stung, but Luck understood their reaction. He had been their quarterback, their leader, and they had invested so much hope in him. But in his heart, Luck knew that walking away was the right decision for his body, for his mind, and for his future. "I've been stuck in this process," Luck explained, his voice cracking with emotion during the press conference. "I've come to the proverbial fork in the road, and I've made a decision that's best for me." He knew it would be a difficult decision for people to understand, but it was one that he had to make for his own well-being. The news of Andrew Luck's retirement sent shockwaves through the NFL. Players, coaches, and fans alike were stunned. Many of his teammates, while surprised, voiced their support for his decision. They had seen firsthand the toll that football had taken on him, and they understood that Luck was making a decision not just for himself, but for his family and his future. For the Colts, the impact was immediate. They were left scrambling to adjust to life without the quarterback who had been the cornerstone of their franchise for the better part of a decade. The team turned to backup quarterback Jacoby Brissett, but the loss of Luck marked the beginning of a tumultuous period for the Colts, who struggled to find consistency at the quarterback position in the years that followed. The media, too, was left reeling. Luck's retirement raised larger questions about the future of football and the toll the game takes on its players. Here was a quarterback who had everything: talent, intelligence, leadership, and yet, at just 29, he felt compelled to walk away. For many, Luck's decision symbolized a shift in the way players were beginning to approach their careers. No longer were they willing to sacrifice their health and happiness for the game. Luck's retirement was a powerful statement about the realities of professional football. Andrew Luck's career, though short, left an indelible mark on the NFL. In just 7 seasons, he had become one of the most respected and admired quarterbacks in the league. He was a 4-time Pro Bowler, the 2018 NFL Comeback Player of the Year, and a player who had led his team to multiple playoff appearances, including an AFC Championship game. But more than the numbers or the accolades, Luck's legacy is defined by his grit and resilience. He was a quarterback who played the game with passion and intensity, a leader who inspired his teammates, and a player who always gave everything he had on the field. Even in the face of adversity, Luck never backed down. He fought through injury after injury, enduring the kind of punishment that would have broken many other players. Yet, as much as he achieved, Luck's career will always be a story of what could have been. His decision to retire at 29, just as he was entering his prime, left many wondering what more he could have accomplished. Could he have led the Colts to a Super Bowl? Could he have gone on to break records and cement his place among the all-time greats? Those questions will never be answered, and for many fans, that's the most difficult part of Luck's story. But for Andrew, the decision to walk away was about more than football. It was about choosing his health, his family, and his future over the game that had consumed his life for so long. It was about finding peace with the decision to leave while he could still live a full, healthy life. Andrew Luck may no longer be playing football, but his legacy endures. He remains a symbol of grace under pressure, of resilience in the face of pain, and of the difficult choices that athletes are forced to make. He walked away from the game on his own terms, with his head held high, knowing that he had given everything he had to football. As fans reflect on Luck's career, they will remember not just the wins and the records, but the way he carried himself both on and off the field. They will remember his intelligence, his humility, and the quiet way in which he led his team through the toughest of battles. And while his career may have ended far sooner than anyone expected, the mark he left on the NFL is undeniable. For Andrew Luck, the future is unwritten. But one thing is certain: his place in the annals of football history is secure. He may have left the game, but his legacy as one of the most talented and resilient quarterbacks of his generation will live on forever.